This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. As the days get shorter and colder, it can really take a toll on how we feel. Maybe that means calling your grandma, writing a letter to your friend, finally grabbing lunch with someone you haven't seen in a while. And just like reaching out to a friend, starting therapy can take a bit of courage. BetterHelp makes it easy to start therapy. You'll be matched with a licensed therapist based on your needs and preferences so you can focus on your growth and goals. Not happy with your match? You can switch therapists anytime with no hassle. This month, don't wait to reach out, whether that's checking in on a friend or reaching out to a therapist yourself. BetterHelp makes it easier to take that first step. And our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/PFF. That's betterhelp.com/PFF.
We've got an international game this week. The international games are kicking back up. 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. The Atlanta Falcons take on the Indianapolis Colts in Berlin, Germany. So switching countries here for the international game. You talk about the Colts, you talk about the Falcons here, Dalton.
I'm going to go with the Falcons, and their offense, their passing game is predicated way too much on two guys. One is Bijan Robinson, and the other is Drake London. Now, London's been so good this year when he's out there that, yes, you want to center your passing game around him. An 89 receiving grade this year, third best in the NFL. He's seventh in yards per route run, third in contested catches, which makes sense considering his frame, and he's run about 30% of his routes from the slot, and he's got the third best slot receiving grade, so he can move around the formation much, so it's not a lot, I should say. Here's the problem is that the Falcons' other wide receivers this season have a 52 receiving grade. That's basically the Cleveland Browns. So you have Drake London and not much else happening on the outside. Bijan moves around the formation. Kyle Pitts gives you a little bit, but the wide receivers outside of London have really let him down this year, which makes for the interesting storyline now with the Colts. With Sauce Gardner coming in, they're saying if he clears concussion protocol that he's going to play in this game. And if it was me and I'm Lou Anarumo, I'm going, listen, kid, I know you don't know the whole playbook. You've only been here a few days. You've got number 5, and we will work the rest around you because we're not afraid of the rest of these guys. I got to think the shadow coverage is coming with Sauce Gardner and Drake London if he is playing, and if Sauce wins that battle, I really don't know where the Falcons' passing game would go from there.
I agree with you. Sauce in this game would be huge. And I know that Sauce hasn't played as consistent in coverage over the last couple of years than he had the first 2 years in the league, but this is still an incredibly talented corner. And even if it's on a short week with him being on a new team, if Lou Anarumo says, hey, we're going to build a defensive structure around you guard that guy. That is something that I feel like Sauce Gardner has the ability to be able to do. And it's coming off of a week where Drake London looked like the most unstoppable receiver in the NFL. And so it you know that he's feeling himself. You know, he's got that sort of momentum. So what a battle that would be if Sauce gets to play in this game. On the other side of things, well, actually, I am going to stick on that side of the ball because I do think that that's what matters most here. The Colts, they're going to bounce back, right? They had a down game against the Steelers. They only lost by 7 points despite turning the ball over 6 times. Like, that offense is going to bounce back. I can't really take a ton from what we saw last week against Pittsburgh because it really was just a really good defensive line in Pittsburgh and a motivated defense being very opportunistic and forcing the takeaways and everything against the Colts. So there's not a lot of similarities between how the Colts played last week versus how they've played throughout the rest of the season. So at this point in time, you kind of have to just treat it as the one-off that it was. Now, if they struggle again this week against the Falcons, now you have some things where when we do, the recap show and the preview show next week, we'll have tangible things to be able to focus on. But as of right now, I think it's going to be a bounce-back week for the Colts offense. And so you talked about the matchup with Drake London and what he could mean in this game. With Michael Penix Jr., something that I watched him struggle with over the last couple of weeks was playing under pressure. And so I looked up a couple of numbers and I was like, well, is he struggling against the blitz? Is he struggling against just like pressure in general? What does it look like for him? And actually, his grades aren't good against pressure, like overall pressure. They have not been good this year. And in fact, the 2 weekly performances in which a Falcons quarterback has played the best under pressure and graded above a 70, those were the Kirk Cousins games when he came into the game. And so Kirk has been able to play well under pressure because he's getting the ball out of his hands very quickly, so pressure's not really affecting him. But on Michael Penix's side of things, he has, not always, but for a good amount of time this season, looked hesitant, not looked confident when it comes to pressure. Now, it hasn't been pressure against the blitz. When he has been facing the blitz, Michael Penix has been able to identify maybe pre-snap, like, okay, this is where I feel like the pressure is coming from. And he's been able to throw into where that pressure is because there's less guys over there. There's less coverage. So he's actually been handling the blitz decently well. It's when teams rush 3 or 4 and get pressure on him with more guys in coverage, that's when he has really struggled. And, as fate would have it in this game, the Colts are number 2 in the NFL behind only the Seattle Seahawks at total pressure generated without the blitz. So it's just going to be an interesting game for Michael Penix. Is he better against that 4-man rush that he's going to see a lot from Indianapolis with a lot more guys in coverage? That's really what I think is the big X factor in this game, because if he could play well under pressure, then I think they've really got a shot. But I think it's a big bounce back week for the Colts here. They've been playing too well. They've been rolling. I'm going Colts 33, Falcons 17. I just wonder if this is after a really nice week from the Falcons against the Patriots, in which they could have beaten one of the better teams in the NFL. I just think this team is really up and down, and I wonder if we're going to get a stinker of a week here from the Falcons.
I actually think I have it closer. I think this could be a high-scoring game, depending on if the Colts have Sauce Gardner and how good he looks in a new defense. But I'm with you. I think the Falcons are a bit thin. I think their top-end weapons, obviously, Bijan and Drake London, can keep them in this game as long as Penix is making the throws. But I also think this is going to be a bounce-back week for the Colts run game, too. This Falcons defense has not looked the same, especially in the run game, since Divine Diablo got hurt, the linebacker. They've had J.D. Bertrand filling in for him. He's been really struggling. So I think it could be a big day for Jonathan Taylor. I'm going to take a high-scoring game, but I'm taking the Colts also 31-27.
Walt in the chat is saying that this could be a trap game for the Colts. And then made sure to let us know, make no mistake, which is his signature line. The Falcons could win this game. All right,
so they certainly could. Look, when they're hot on offense, they get really, really hot. And I think there is a scenario where that does happen, but it does come down to their best players playing their best because they don't have a ton of depth.
I hope we get the Sauce and London matchup. I really do.